Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 64, Moreno vs. Erceg, also known as UFC Mexico City. I'm your host, Sherdog Senior Editor Ben Duffy. We have a special episode for you. Due to some unforeseen schedule conflicts, some irresolvable scheduling conflicts, Keith and I could not record together. So we recorded our previews for these fights separately. I'm going to splice them together in post-production. The drawback to that is that we won't have the lively back and forth that you know and love or know and hate. The upside, I suppose, is that you get to see a lot more of our respective living rooms than you're used to seeing, since we will alternate being on your full screen. At any rate, the UFC descends on Mexico City this Saturday. It is a 13-fight card, heavily stacked with Mexican fighters or Mexican American fighters. It's probably worth taking a moment to talk about that. Obviously, anytime the UFC is going outside of Vegas, they are motivated to have a geographically appropriate card. They were just in London last weekend. There were, I think, a dozen British or Irish fighters on the card at least, and a lot of them in matchups designed to be very winnable and or very entertaining. It doesn't always pan out that way. Brits didn't actually have a great night at the office at UFC London, but the UFC did what it could to ensure that the hometown crowd had something to cheer for. Similarly, they're doing the same here with UFC Mexico City. There are a number of Mexican fighters on this card, a lot of the biggest Mexican stars in the UFC. A lot of the Mexican fighters on the card are in, let's say, well-crafted matchups. We'll probably talk a little bit more about those as we come up on the individual fights. I'm going to plug in here Keith's overall thoughts on the card, and then we'll dive right into these prelims.
All right, so first I'll give my thoughts on the card. I think it's a pretty good card. I give it probably a B. I think the thing that really stands out to me, obviously, you have flyweights in the main event, which I've always usually excited about, especially two action guys like Moreno and Erceg. But the thing that kind of stands out to me is there isn't many fights where I'm like, oh, this guy is clearly way better than the other guy. I think a lot of the fights are pretty evenly matched. Obviously, I could be wrong about the betting lines. But all in all, Mexico is always a good crowd. Obviously, the Mexican fans are, historically known for being combat sports fans. A lot of Mexicans on this card. Mexico has really kind of blossomed recently in MMA. So I think it should be a really fun card. I think the crowd should be really live, and there's a lot of fights I'm really looking for. So I give it like a B.
First up at UFC Mexico City is a lightweight matchup between Marquel Mederos and Austin Hubbard. Mederos, the 28-year-old Texan by way of Colorado, is 9-1 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of Season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series and as a standout in Fury Fighting Championship. He made his debut in the UFC just a little over a year ago at UFC Fight Night Dolidze versus Imavov, where he took a unanimous decision over Landon Quinones. He has been on the shelf ever since. He's going to step back in here looking for his second win in a row in the UFC, his 8th win overall, and standing in his way will be Hubbard. 33-year-old Colorado native, now training out of Greater Chicago, is 16-8 overall. He is 4-6 across 2 separate stints in the UFC. He was signed by the UFC back in 2019 as the outgoing LFA lightweight champ. He went 3-4 during that time, was released. He went and won a couple of fights in a couple of regional promotions, including a win over Julian Lane at XMMA down in Florida. That win was enough to convince the UFC to let him bang again, and he is 1-2 since returning. He is coming in off of a loss. He fought last October at UFC 307, where he dropped a split decision to Alexander Hernandez. So he'll be looking to get back in the win column, claw his way back towards 500 in the UFC. He is not favored to do so, as Mederos is minus 190, Hubbard plus 160. We will flip it to Keith for his pick.
All right, first fight I have Austin Hubbard versus Marquel Mederos. Again, I apologize if I pronounce anybody's name wrong on the card. I'll start with Austin Hubbard. He's really big guy for the weight class, but he's a pretty terrible athlete, comparatively for a professional athlete. He tries to make up it with pressure. I'd say he's an okay boxer. He has some nice tight combinations. He does really load up sometimes. He has more power than I originally credited him with. So that's good. He still has a lot of defensive issues. He keeps his chin high. He drops his hands. He pulls his head straight back on the center line. He has a solid kicking game. I like his teep kicks. I like his stepping knees. I go back to the Mark Madsen fight where he hurt Mark Madsen with a stepping knee. He works the cast well. He is heavy on his front leg, which makes him open to leg kicks himself. He tries to wrestle, but his wrestling is really inconsistent. I mean, he out-wrestled Aaron McKenzie, Caio Prepoli. He got takedowns in, but then he struggled taking down Alex Hernandez. If taken down, like he was taken down by Mark Madsen, Madsen, who's a decorated wrestler, struggled to keep him down. So he's got a pretty good get-up game. On top, he showed good ground and pound against Aaron McKenzie on his stint on Tough. Sub-defense has been an issue as he's easily slugged by Kurt Halabaugh. Move over to Mederos. Mederos is a guy, he fights out of both stances, constantly switching to get his opponents guessing. He's a counter striker. He sets up his shots well by drawing out attacks with feints. He's good. He likes like fading back and countering, so slipping back and then countering. He's got some quick hands. He's accurate. I love that he targets the body. He has nice power. He has 6 TKOs. He throws a hard leg kicks. I like his stepping knees. He doesn't wrestle much. He is a bad defensive wrestler. And I should say he shouldn't wrestle. He does wrestle much, offensive wrestling. But he has shown if he's taken down, he's got a good ability to get back up to his feet. I've flip-flopped on this one. Hubbard is the more crafty. Like he's a crafty vet. He's more crafty than talented. But I'm not really high on either guy. I'm leaning towards the younger fighter. I'm going to go with Mederos here. I think we get a back-and-forth matchup. I have zero confidence in my pick, as, again, I'm not that high on either guy. I can see Hubbard winning just by volume, but I see Mederos as the cleaner fighter. Give me Mederos by split decision, and probably my least confident pick of the night.
I'm with Keith here. I don't have a super strong take on this fight either. I'm leaning towards Mederos as the younger guy, the guy that has settled in at a great team at this point, and he's just, I think, 2 or 3 fights into his tenure at Factory X. Those 2 factors make me think that of the 2 of these, he's the one who's more likely to have improved and maybe drastically improved, maybe made some serious strides since the last time we saw him in the cage. Whereas Hubbard has always been kind of a marginal UFC talent. And it sounds insulting when I say that, but saying you're a marginal UFC lightweight means you are a marginal top 50 fighter in one of the deepest weight classes in the entire sport. It's not meant as a diss at all, but Hubbard is a guy that until the wheels fall off, he'll probably struggle to get to 500 in the UFC. And then when the UFC cuts him, he'll just go wreck shop in LFA or XMMA or wherever he goes. I think this has the potential to be one of the more fun fights of the night. I could see this being primarily kind of a loose brawl on the feet, and if and when either guy decides to initiate the ground game. Neither of them are great defensive wrestlers. Neither of them are airtight top position grapplers. So whatever time they spend wrestling is probably going to be full of fun scrambles and wild positions. So give me Mederos by decision here in a real fun fight. And again, I'm not super confident in this one either, but yeah, give me the younger guy with the higher upside. Featherweights take the cage next at UFC Mexico City as Jamall Emmers squares off against Gabriel Miranda. Emmers, the 35-year-old Californian, is 20-8 overall. He's 3-4 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Season 2 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on the Contender Series all the way back in 2018. He actually lost to Julian Erosa, went and won a couple more fights in LFA and a couple other regional promotions before getting the call up. Since then, he has alternated losses and wins, leading right up to his last cage appearance, which was almost exactly a year ago. He got knocked out in the first round by Nate Landwehr. So if the pattern holds, he should be due to get back in the win column here. In order to do that, he will need to get past Miranda. Miranda, also 35 years old, hailing from Brazil, 17-7 overall, 1-2 since joining the UFC a little over 2 years ago as a late replacement opponent for Benoit Saint-Denis. He did that on short notice, up a weight class with predictable results, but since then he's been back down at 145 pounds. He has a win over Shane Young in September of 2023, and then in his most recent appearance last September, he was doing pretty well against Morgan Charrier before getting clocked early in the second round. So he has also alternated losses and wins throughout his UFC run. He is also due to get back in the green here. Something's got to give. If the bookmakers and bettors are to be believed, it's Emmers who's going to keep it going, as he is a comfortable minus 350 favorite. Miranda plus 250 on the comeback. Let's hear what Keith has to say about this one.
Emmers, I mean, he's so inconsistent. He looks incredibly good, in one fight and then bad in another. I mean, I go back to like Dennis Bazooka fight. He looked incredible in that fight. And then he follows up by losing to Nate Landwehr. So I really don't know what kind of guy we're going to see. He's really big for the weight class. He's long and lanky. He's a high output striker that really wants to press the action. He doesn't want to be pressed back. I go back to like the Kyle Nelson fight. He hated the pressure in that fight. He is fast. He's accurate. He works from distance really well. He's got a nice jab. I like his straight right cross. He targets the body. He's got nice stepping knees. He has big power. I've said this before, he's starting to add power as he's getting older. He might be getting some old man power. He does avoid strikes by backing straight up, which I hate. Like I said, he's a big guy, so he can close the distance, use his size and clinch and grind on his opponents. He uses his big frame to kind of blast knees inside. He can wrestle, and he's a pretty good chain wrestler, good at winning scrambles. He can control Jack Jenkins from on top, though he was stalling a little bit in that fight. He is a submission threat. I am worried about his durability, though, after that KO loss to Landwehr. Moving over to Miranda. Miranda, I mean, he's a high-volume striker on the feet. He likes to box a little bit, but most of his boxing is to close the distance to get the fight down. He attacks with combinations. I'd say he has plus power. The problem is he's got a lot of defensive issues. He keeps his chin high in the air. He's not a bad wrestler. He can wrestle a little bit, but more of a grappler than a wrestler. If he gets the fight to the ground, he does have to improve his top control. If he can't get the fight to the ground, I mean, this guy he's willing to pull guard if he gets that close. He's that confident in this BJJ. He kind of wants to get the fight to the ground as quick as possible. He's a big submission threat if he does get it there. He's got 16 subs on the record. He chains attempts together really well. He's got a great guillotine. You have to worry about his durability, though. He's taken a lot of damage in 2 out of his last 3 fights. He has also gassed out in the past. So as far as prediction go, I said that I was really don't know what I'm getting with Emmers. I'm kind of on the fence on this guy. He's so inconsistent, but he's still way too big for Miranda. I think he's too fast. I see Miranda only kind of having a big haymaker's chance on the feet, and more likely his best average victory is catching a sub if Emmers make a mistake. And Emmers is the guy who can do that, but I think on the feet, Emmers pieces him up. I think Miranda tries to get to the fight ground. I keep imagining Emerson finishing Miranda with like a step in knee or something. I think Emmers, I don't know what the betting line is, but I think he should be like a negative 350, negative 400 favorite. Give me Emmers. I say he gets it early. First round TKO. I lost the house last week on Jai Herbert, even though I think he could have got that decision. So I'm going to try to get it back this week. So bet your car this week. Give me Emmers. This is my lock of the night.
It sounds as though Keith is pretty confident in Emmers while acknowledging how inconsistent Emmers can be, as you might expect of Bobby Green's primary training partner. I don't know. I totally get where Keith is coming from on this one. When good Jamall Emmers shows up, he looks like a top 10 featherweight. It's as simple as that. He's a slick striker who is long and rangy, fast hands, and at his best, uses distance very well. And there are plenty of fighters who don't. He's a very competent offensive and defensive wrestler, again, when the mood strikes him. And he just seems capable of kind of laying an egg on any given Saturday. If he doesn't, he really should have the advantage over Miranda just about everywhere here. Having said that, Miranda's better. He's a better fighter than his UFC record indicates. I mentioned off the top that he made his debut short notice against Benoit Saint-Denis. Like, forget a contract. You should get a medal for that. Then he destroys Shane Young. Not too much we can draw from that. Shane Young just didn't turn out to be very good. And then the Morgan Charrier fight, he was actually doing very well. He'd won the first round. He was coming back out to rinse and repeat in the second and just got absolutely nailed with a beautiful punch. And that's not something that Charrier does a whole lot. Like, if Miranda and Charrier fight 10 times, I don't know if they go 6-4, 5-5, 4-6, but Miranda probably only gets one shot at that one time. So you got to kind of feel for the guy. But for him to win this fight, Emmers would have to either make a huge tactical mistake, just, not bring his hands back, slip and fall on a banana peel, or he'd have to make a terrible strategic mistake like choosing to go to the ground with Miranda. Miranda is a very tricky grappler. He is capable of throwing up good offense from his back. He is capable of snaring people in scrambles. He is a good top position grappler, good at advancing position, pelting people with enough ground and pound to keep them busy, keep the ref off them while he works to get to dominant positions and submit his opponents. But for that to work on Emmers, it would take Emmers screwing up. And while I can't rule that out entirely, I'm with Keith here. Give me Emmers, and probably in pretty lopsided fashion. I'm going to say he knocks out Miranda in the second round. Like, maybe we get a wild first round. Emmers buckles down a little bit, gets yelled at by his corner, and comes out and just flattens Miranda in the second. I am not confident betting the house or the car on it, but the UFC Mexico City undercard powers on with a lightweight contest between Rafa Garcia and Vinc Pichel. Garcia, the 30-year-old Mexican, is 16-4 overall. He's 4-4 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Combate Global lightweight champ. He's coming in off a loss. He fought just once last year. It was at UFC Fight Night Royval versus Tyra last October, where he got knocked out in the second round by Grant Dawson. That snapped a 2-fight win streak for him. He'll look to start a new one up at the expense of Pichel. 42-year-old Californian is 14-4 overall. He is 7-4 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight losing streak, the first losing streak of any kind of his career. He fought just once last year. It was at UFC 301 last May, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Ismael Bonfim. Prior to that, you have to go all the way back to April of 2022 for his last cage appearance, where he lost via decision to Mark O. Madsen. Prior to that, he'd been on a 3-fight win streak and had gotten his health sorted out, at least by Vinc Pichel standards, and appeared to have some momentum. That's all gone by the wayside. At this point, again, he's a 42-year-old lightweight who is on a 2-fight losing streak, and he is unsurprisingly the biggest underdog on the card, as Garcia comes in at minus 500, Pichel plus 375. Both of these guys, I think, can be categorized as disappointing in their own ways in the UFC. I'm on record as thinking that Rafa Garcia was going to be, if not a future contender, at least a solid UFC lightweight. I thought he was one of the better fighters to come to the UFC out of Combate, maybe ever. And instead, he's just sort of slotted in comfortably as another guy at 155. He is 500 in the UFC right now. And for the most part, he has lost to the good fighters. Jakar Close, Grant Dawson, Nasrat Hakparast, and he's beaten the ones that either aren't very good, like Mahashate, or the ones that are ridiculously over the hill, like Clay Guida, which seems very appropriate to bring up here as he prepares to take on 42-year-old Pichel. Pichel, disappointing mostly just in terms of his health. His nickname is From Hell. I can only assume he got that nickname from his orthopedic surgeon. Vinc Pichel has been in the UFC for over 12 years now. He has 11 fights in that time. I can't remember the last time he fought more than once in a calendar year. And on the opposite side of that, he has multiple absences of a year or more with injuries. He's an interesting guy health-wise. There are a lot of famously injured fighters that would famously injure the same thing over and over again. You think, oh, Shogun's knees. Oh, Fedor broke his hand again. Pichel gets injured like a guy trying to capture Pokemon or trying to win a game of bingo. Like knees, biceps, neck. He got in that motorcycle wreck 5 or 6 years ago that stripped all the skin off his back. Yeah, like I hope Pichel has like a Subway or Quiznos like punch card at his surgeon's office and is getting some sort of like free perks. But what that's meant is he's been a good and competent fighter. And I don't know if he ever had top 10, top 15 upside. I think he did at one point, but his activity rate has been so low that he hasn't even been able to settle in as a Jim Miller, Clay Guida type, where, I think about it this way. We would look at Vinc Pichel differently if instead of 7-4 in the UFC, he was 14-8 right now. If he had just twice as many fights. And you know what? Twice as many fights, 22 fights in 12 years. That still isn't very active. But instead, he's a guy that shows up again once a year, once every 2 years, and reminds us of how good he used to be or could have been. I think he was a pretty decent athlete in his early 30s. That has gone by the wayside at this point. He is slow. While he's still tough as nails, his durability in terms of cardio, like he doesn't have that extra gear. He doesn't have that. He can't quite dig deep anymore. Like the losses to Madsen and Bonfim, just he was competitive, but was just never able to turn it up a notch. For all those reasons, I understand why Garcia is the favorite here. Pichel's bigger than Garcia, but he's never been a great defensive wrestler. Garcia is a compact, athletic, pretty explosive guy that is a very good grappler, good in scrambles, not a great conventional wrestler, but he might not have to be against Pichel. I think Garcia has a market advantage pretty much everywhere this fight goes. If you tell me Sunday morning that neither guy attempted a takedown the whole fight and it took place completely on the feet, I'm thinking Garcia probably won all 3 rounds just in a striking contest. If you tell me half this fight took place on the ground and out of a 15-minute fight, there were 9 minutes of top control time, I'm going to guess that almost all of it was Garcia's and that Pichel was, if not fighting for his life from submissions, at least in reactive mode, defending himself, stopping Garcia from taking his back, stopping Garcia from moving to mount or side control for long stretches of the fight. I think this is a fight where, Garcia's just probably going to kind of leave Pichel in the dust. Pichel being as tough as he is, I'm thinking this one makes it to decision. I believe Keith said he could see Pichel getting cut. I could certainly see that. I could also see Pichel retiring. Hell, I could see him retiring, win or lose. It's always nice to see a UFC fighter go out on top, especially one that was never at the top level of the sport. So if Vinc Pichel gets a nice farewell, lovely. If he has to lay down the gloves in the cage as the Mexican crowd is just going bananas for Garcia, that's not quite as nice, but maybe still best for Pichel. Either way, give me Garcia in a dominant decision here.
Vinc Vinc Pichel, it's hard to know what you get. I mean, the guy's up there in age. He's so inactive. He's at the age where you just fall off overnight, and because we haven't seen him much, we don't know when that decline when it has happened, if it has. He's such a poor athlete. He's flat-footed. He's super tough though. He's got great volume. I think he has lost some hand speed, but it wasn't great to begin with. He wants to march down his foes, use feints well to set up his strikes. He does a lot of hand fighting to kind of measure his foes. He's willing to eat a shot to land a big shot himself. He has shown that he still has a chin on him, though. He can take some shots. He's got a big kicking game, a lot of calf kicks. He likes to close the distance and use his size inside. He will drop down on the legs and look for a takedown, but I think he's a better wrestler. You know what? I think he's a better wrestler than he's credited with, but I still wouldn't count him as a wrestler. If taken down, he is hard to hold down. Garcia, he's also a minus athlete, but he's also super tough. He has, he's a high volume striker. He works behind a jab. He pretty much beat Clay Guida with a jab alone. He follows the jab into the pocket where he's willing to throw down some big shots. He throws hard looping power shots. Though he isn't a one-punch fight ender, he is durable too. I mean, he hit some big shots from Nasrat Hakparas and just kept coming. He isn't a bad wrestler, good reactionary double if he's pressured, good at turning the corner and driving through the hips well. Kind of similar to what we just saw Wyatt Hendricks did to Gable Steveson and the NCAA finals. And side note, and possibly the biggest upset in NCAA wrestling history. He can, going back to Garcia, he can overreach on his takedown attempts, though. Very kind of Michael Chiesa style. But he's constantly looking for the takedowns. He's relentless to get it there. He also has shown power to just get a leg and lift up his opponents. He's got some strong takedown defense. He stopped all of the takedown attempts from Clay Guida. He's got a nice submission win over Jesse Ronson. And he shows some really good cardio against Natan Levy. I think Pichel is an underrated fighter. I think he's a gamer. He's an old veteran, tough, crafty guy. But at that age, can he really keep up with the pace of Garcia? I mean, that's going to be really tough. I expect Garcia to win everywhere. I expect he works Pichel in the feet with a jab. I think he mixes in a takedown. I say it's rinse repeat for 15 minutes. I think Garcia wins the decision. And you know what? I think this might be the last we see of Vinc Pichel. He might get caught or more likely, I think he might even retire. Give me Garcia by decision.
We head next to the strawweight division for the lone women's fight on the card as Lupi Godinez looks to thrill the hometown crowd against Julia Polastri. Godinez, the 31-year-old Mexican, by way of Canada, by way of Mexico again, is 12-5 overall. She's 7-5 in the UFC. She is on the first losing streak of any kind of her professional career as she dropped both of her octagon appearances of 2024. She lost a decision to Verna Jandiroba in March and then came back in August at UFC on ABC Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov and lost a decision to Mackenzie Dern. She'll look to snap that streak at the expense of Polastri. 27-year-old Brazilian is 13-4 overall. She's 1-1 since joining the UFC as a two-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. She fought on Season 5 and lost to Jasmine Yazdavicius, then came back on Season 7, tapped out Patricia Alujas. That got her signed to the UFC, where she dropped her debut last June to Josephine Knudsen, then came back in October at UFC Fight Night, Royval versus Tyra, and took a split decision over Corey McKenna. She will look to make it 2 in a row. She is not favored to do so, however, as Godinez comes in at 240 at minus 240 as your favorite, Polastri plus 190 as the underdog. Let's hear what Keith has to say about this one.
All right, next up we have Lupi Godinez versus Julia Polastri. Everyone knows I'm a big Lupi Godinez fan. She's a wrestler boxer that has kind of fallen in love with her boxing. She does well to cut off her cage and trap her opponents, though sometimes she won't match her opponent's output. She did that against Tabitha Ricci. I mean, her volume has really dipped. Her lack of volume against Mackenzie Dern, I mean, I truly believe it cost her the fight. She had exactly the fight she needed to win, and yet she gave away huge moments of that fight by simply just not throwing enough. I said I was done with her, but here I am again, breaking her down and on the fence if I want to take her. She, I've said this before, she does everything possible to try to lose, I swear. Too many single strikes recently. She's been headhunting a lot. When she gets in the pocket, I do like her boxing. She's got quick hands. She's got nice tight hooks. I like when she straightens it out and kind of cleans it up. And she's got some good power in her blows. That's because she really steps into her shots. I mean, I say that I call her a wrestle boxer. Her wrestling is really good. One of the best wrestlers in women's MMA. The problem is she hasn't been using. I always go back to that Angela Hill fight where she lost simply because she refused to wrestle. When she does wrestle, she's explosive. She drives through the hips. She's so strong. She can get a limb and just get her opponents for a ride, get on the hips, look for slams. I mean, she threw Jessica Penne, Silvana Gomez Suarez, Luma Lugwumi, Elise Reed. I think the most impressive is how easily she was taken down Ariane Canalosi. I mean, I always go back to that. She hit a duck under in that fight, which you never see in MMA. Her takedown defense needs to improve. That's because she really kind of ignores all aspects of wrestling. That she kind of, when she's striking, that's all she's thinking about. I mean, she was taken down twice by Mackenzie Dern, though she's a way better wrestler than Mackenzie Dern. If she's on top, she has a good top game, good at following her hips well. Showed some slick BJJ with a belly down armbar against Suarez. Got a rear naked choke against Elise Reed. She showed good submission defense against Dern in their fight. Polastri, she's a good striker, very relaxed on the feet, kind of Muay Thai striker, standing directly in front of her opponent, slowly marching down, taking the ground, high output. I'd say she's a builder. She gets stronger as the fight moves along. She slides in the pocket and she unloads big shots. I mean, she really steps into her shots. She has nice power. I love her body work. She has a really big kicking game. I like her teep kicks. She's got some hard calf kicks. She does hang her hands low, leaving her open to be hit. And I think it'd be good for Godinez to kind of wrestle, would kind of force her to drop her hands a little more, pulling her hands down more. She pulls her head straight back. She also tries to roll with punches, which I've said this a million times. I don't think ever looks good for the judges. She eats a lot of punches for my liking. She's a solid wrestler, though, for someone who's known for striking. She's not bad. If she gets on top, I like her game there. She's got good ground and pound. She has 3 subs on her record. So I should be done with Godinez. The problem is I've always said that if Godinez, she could be something special if you got her head out of her ass. I mean, she has one of the worst fight IQs in the game. If she either upped her volume on the feet or used her wrestling, I mean, she could have 3 or 4 more wins currently in the UFC. She's like junk food to me. Like, I shouldn't be eating them. I should stay away from. I know it's bad for you, but I keep going back to them. I shouldn't do it, but I'm picking her again. I'm gonna die with Godinez. I say she finally wrestles. She's got to know she has such an advantage if she wrestles. I say she wins the decision. Give me Godinez by decision.
I'm with Keith here. It's Godinez's run in the UFC so far, I have to admit, has been a little disappointing, at least compared to my expectations for her. If you had asked me 5-6 years ago when she got to the UFC, I would have predicted that by the beginning of 2025, she would be a top 10 mainstay and maybe not a champ, but I would not have been surprised at all if she had challenged for a title at least once. Instead, she's 7-5, like kind of hovering a little over 500. And she's been more or less the author of her own misery in a lot of ways. She is an athletically gifted woman, like compact, powerful, explosive. But more importantly, she has a single standout skill that almost nobody in that division can deal with, let alone match. She is one of the 2 or 3 best offensive wrestlers in any of the UFC's women's divisions. I would say at strawweight, it is Tatiana Suarez, Lupi Godinez, and then the gap before the number 3 best wrestler in that division is wide. So Godinez's 5 UFC losses mostly can be chalked up to her either, for whatever mystifying reason, not leaning into her wrestling, or in her fights against Jandiroba and Dern, finally running into high enough level fighters and dangerous enough grapplers that they can counteract her wrestling, and the ground doesn't look like such a welcoming place to take the fight, perhaps. None of that should matter against Polastri. Polastri is a talented and well-rounded fighter in her own right, but lots of Godinez's opponents have been well-rounded, and for the most part, Godinez has been able to take them down at will when she wants. Here, I like how Keith picked this as a fight where Godinez wins more or less by coming to her senses and steering into her best individual skill. I agree. I think if Godinez fights smart here, she's able to take down Polastri in all 3 rounds. And from there, it's kind of as dominant as she wants it to be. I think she takes Polastri down, chips away with strikes on top, stays busy. At worst, stays busy enough to keep the fight from getting stood up. This could be the kind of fight where Godinez has 9 or 10 minutes of top control time in a 15-minute fight. Or if she really turns up the jets, or Polastri isn't prepared to deal with her top game, it could be a thing where she's taking Polastri's back, she's threatening with arm triangles from the top, and we get 10-8 rounds, or we even get a submission or a TKO on the ground. I have Godinez big here, and same as Keith said, it is a pick that is contingent on her fighting to her best advantage. I think she's going to do that in Mexico City, not leave anything to chance. The crowd's going to love her if she wins, regardless of how many fireworks there are or not in the cage. We head back to the featherweight division at UFC Mexico City as Christian Rodriguez faces off against Melquizael Costa. Rodriguez, the 27-year-old Rufasport product, is 12-2 overall. He is 5-2 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series, wasn't immediately signed, but he was signed like 6 months later. Again, 5-2 since then. He's coming in off a win. He's already fought once this year. He took a unanimous decision over Austin Bashi back in January at UFC Fight Night Dern versus Ribas 2. He will look to make it 2 in a row here at the expense of Costa. Costa, 28-year-old Brazilian, is 22-7 overall. He's 3-2 in the UFC. He's 3-1 at featherweight. Kind of like Gabriel Miranda that we've already discussed on this card. He's a featherweight who made his UFC debut on short notice, up a weight class against at least a fringe contender in the form of Thiago Moises. That did not go well for him, but he has parlayed that goodwill into a nice run at featherweight, and he's on a 2-fight win streak. He fought already once this year. It was back in February at UFC Fight Night Cejudo versus Song, where he guillotined Andre Fili in the first round. He will look to make it 3 in a row. He is not favored to do so, but this is one of the closer lines on the card, as Rodriguez is -150, Costa +120. Let's flip it to Keith for his pick.
All right, next fight is Christian Rodriguez versus Melquizael Costa. I apologize. I know I butchered his first name. I'll start with Rodriguez, just kind of the guy who keeps getting matched up with the up and comers, the next big thing, and really upsetting the matchmaker's plans with certain guys, as he pulled a couple upsets already in his career. He's a really good athlete, good boxer, high volume on the feet. He's a pressure counter striker. He kind of, the one fight he didn't look good against Julian Erosa. He hated the pressure from Julian Erosa. He struggled with the range of Julian Erosa. He kind of likes to slip out of range and set his own counters. He fights behind a high guard defense, works behind a good jab. He has got some nice power. His overhand right kept hurting Stephen Pierce several times in their fight. He's got good step-in elbows. I love how he worked the body so well in so many fights. He's a solid offensive wrestler, but he's a weak defensive wrestler. He showed a good get-up game against Isaac Dolgarian when he was taken down. That's a good wrestler. He loves Granby rolls to escape. He's good at kind of creating a scramble and winning those. He has 4 subs wins. He loves the guillotine. He's got a good anaconda. He also subbed Josh Weems with the Anaconda choke. I think he has got 4 submission wins, though he was subbed by Julian Erosa. He's shown good submission defense in other fights, though, so it's not something I'm too concerned about. His cardio has been an issue in the past, but it looked really good against Austin Bashi. Move over to Costa. Costa's a southpaw, though he will switch stances a lot. He's a solid striker, nice jab, follows up with power combinations. I'd say he has stinging power. For longer and lengthier guy, he's got more power than he gets credited with. He'll like to throw out some spinning attacks. He's got a really good kicking game. He showed against Austin Lingo. Throws a lot of kicks, though sometimes he doesn't really set it up. Nice kicks to the body from the orthodox stance. I like his teep kicks. He destroyed Austin Lingo with body kicks. Good step in knees. I'd say he's an underrated offensive wrestler, but he's a weak defensive wrestler. If he ends up on top, he's got some mean ground and pound. He's a very good grappler, some good back takes. He's a submission threat, super slick off his back, as we saw in his last fight. He subbed Shaolin Nurabekov and Andre Fili recently. He was submitted by Thiago Moises, but I'm not too concerned there. He struggles to get off the bottom sometimes because he plays a lot of jiu-jitsu. You also have to worry about his chin a little bit as he was knocked out by Steven Garcia. I like both guys a lot. I think they're both really good. I've kind of flip-flopped on my pick here. I'm really torn. I hate to pick against Rodriguez. He has burned me in the past, but I'm gonna go there again. I'm gonna go Costa to win. I'm gonna say he wins based on those kicks. I think he's still the better submission grappler of the two, though. I think Rodriguez is a better wrestler. I think it's gonna be super close. I'm gonna say Costa wins a split decision.
This is a tough one to pick, man. I like the Keith said right off the bat that, yeah, same as him. I like both these guys. Both under 30. Both have already kind of pleasantly surprised us and seem to be still continuing to improve. I do like how Christian Rodriguez has sort of settled in as the prospect spoiler. At this point, he has 5 wins in the UFC, and 4 of them are over like lights out prospects that were much more heralded than him. Starting with Raul Rosas Jr., whom we'll talk about a little bit later, then Cameron Saimon. Okay, Saimon had already lost a little bit of the shine before they met, but then Isaac Dolgarian and Austin Bashi. I believe in the case of Rosas, Dolgarian, and Bashi, Rodriguez handed each of them their first loss. He is the spoiler, which is kind of a cool thing to be able to hang your hat on. Costa is not cut from the same mold as those blue chip prospects. He's more of a guy kind of like Rodriguez himself, who's had to fight for every bit of respect and attention he's gotten. It's a fascinating matchup of styles because I'm leaning Rodriguez here, but the thing is, I can see him just getting kind of, if not paralyzed by Costa's aggression and forward pressure, just never fully getting untracked because of it. I'm thinking back to just a couple weeks ago to Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev, where, it's not like Ankalaev was ringing him up. It's just he never let Pereira get comfortable. I could see Costa doing that to Rodriguez. I think Rodriguez is the better wrestler. And while Costa might be the more dangerous overall grappler, especially in terms of like submission grappling, Rodriguez being the better wrestler means that most of the time they go to the ground is probably going to start with Rodriguez on top. And no matter how good a grappler you are from guard off your back, it is a tough way to win fights in MMA in the modern era. I don't have a ton of confidence in this pick, but give me Rodriguez to prevail as the slight favorite. I could totally see this being a split decision type thing. I definitely see it being one where Costa wins at least one round on the judges' scorecards. And again, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if Costa just really stymies Rodriguez, or being the harder hitter on a shot-for-shot basis. If he catches Rodriguez with something big and hurts him bad, obviously the whole fight could turn on that. But give me Rodriguez to kind of thread the needle here, at least hold his own on the feet, get some well-timed takedowns, do some work from top position, maybe chip away with some ground and pound, maybe put Costa in a little bit of trouble, and just as importantly, stay out of trouble himself in Costa's guard. But yeah, give me Rodriguez by decision here, and I think that's our first disagreement of the night. We head now to the middleweight division as Jose Medina welcomes Ateba Gautier to the UFC. Medina, the 33-year-old Bolivian, is 11-4 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost on the Contender Series back in October of 2023, got the call up to the UFC last August at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Bajalio, where he dropped a decision to Zach Reese. So still looking for his first Octagon win on his third try. He will have to do it now against Gautier. 22-year-old Cameroonian is 6-1 overall. He is making his debut here. He fought on the Contender Series last September, knocking out Yura Naito in the second round. Odds here, perhaps unsurprisingly, favor the newcomer pretty heavily. He is minus 450. Medina is plus 350 on the comeback. So when you see a young fighter from Cameroon who is pretty raw in terms of skills, but has crushing, uncoachable power, the natural comparison is, well, is this guy middleweight Francis Ngannou? No, he isn't. For better or for worse. For one thing, there is, okay, yeah, this guy's got good natural power. And then there's, I got working in the sand mines power. You know, Francis Ngannou might be the hardest hitter in the history of the sport. Gautier, not quite at that level, but definitely a hell of an athlete, a good striker already. And if we're making the Ngannou comparison, he's a more diverse striker than Ngannou was at this point in his career. You look back at Ngannou, a fight or two into his UFC career, he was primarily a boxer and not a terribly refined boxer at that. He was mostly a slugger who, even though his skills were raw, had this natural ability to just have his feet planted under him and land with incredible power, even in fast-moving collision-type situations. By comparison, Gautier already has a nice, diverse kicking game that makes good use of his long legs and his speed. He's gotten pretty good with short knees, intercepting knees on people that want to take him down. So definitely not calling him the middleweight Ngannou or the next Ngannou or any kind of Ngannou, but he is a very intriguing addition to the UFC middleweight division. But having said that, I can already hear how the UFC booth will be hyping this guy up, but it's worth noting that he had a pretty rough time on the Contender Series against a not terribly good fighter. The problem isn't just that Yura Naito took him down in the first round. It's that once Gautier was on the ground, he didn't seem to have much of a clue what to do. Yeah, if you're a 6'4" guy that kicks a lot, some people are going to be able to take you down. But just the way he seemed to concede bottom position, just lay flat on his back, not really even try to get back up in the last minute or so of the round, is concerning. Because maybe not Jose Medina, but plenty of UFC middleweights are going to punish that kind of tactical surrender really, really severely. Having said that, I'm not even sure Medina is as good as Yura Naito is. Looking at Medina, he's a guy of modest skills who looks a little undersized at 185. Like he's like barely 6 feet tall, looks a little soft. He looks like a guy who could make 170, and he's stepping in there against Gautier, who is instantly going to be one of the very biggest guys in the division. Gautier should be able to knock Medina out almost at will, but again, you could say the same thing about Naito on the Contender Series, which was like 6 months ago. I could see Medina taking Gautier down. The question from there, assuming that happens, is can Medina do work there? Can he pass Gautier's guard? Can he hit him with some serious ground and pound? Can he make him uncomfortable enough that he gives up his back and Medina can actually go to work to finish the fight? I don't know. I'm going to go with Gautier to win this fight. He's too good, too promising. And again, Medina just, I don't think is UFC material, at least not UFC middleweight material. But I could see it being another one like the Naito fight where Medina takes Gautier down and Gautier either struggles to get back up or just has to wait for the round to end. But sometime in the 3 rounds of this fight, he's going to fight off a takedown, or like he did to Naito, he's just going to crush Medina with a single punch on the way in. So I'm going to say Gautier gets a second round knockout here again. And I could see it again being one where if you only look at the highlight at the end, you might think this guy is destined for greatness, but actually watching the fight shows that he still has a lot to take back to the drawing board.
Jose Medina, he's a poor athlete, kind of a lumbering kind of guy. He tries to make up it with high volume. He's an insanely tough dude. I mean, this dude can take a beat and just keep coming. He's not the most skilled guy, but what he kind of, he makes up with toughness. He lacks hand speed. He wants to get it down and throw it on the pocket. He loves to brawl. I'd say he has plus power. The problem is he's so defensively poor. He's very hittable. He doesn't move his head. He's got his legs beat up going back to like the Contender Series fight. He will close the distance and grind and clinch. He'll try to get the fight to the ground, but he isn't much of a wrestler. If he ends up on top, he has good ground and pound, but he's a terrible defensive wrestler. Yeah, he struggles to get off the bottom. He does have 2 submission wins, and he has good cardio. If he can make this war, that's his chance. Gautier, I mean, this guy's making his UFC debut. He's only 22 years old, so you're like that. He's a really incredible athlete. I mean, you look at him, the dude's built like a brick shithouse. I'm talking like Bo Nickel type physique. He has beaten a lot of bums though on the regional scene. This is, I mean, the guy he beat in the Contender Series is pretty good and probably equal to Medina, but other than that, he's fought nobody's. What I've seen of him, he's a good striker, good footwork, solid boxing. He's got huge power. I like his stepping knees. He'll throw kicks, but he throws a lot of naked kicks, kind of leaving him open to be countered. Doesn't have much of an offensive wrestling game, and I think he needs to improve his takedown defense. He has no subs on his record, and he also needs to improve his get-up game. As far as prediction, if Medina's going to have to weather an early storm with Gautier, and if he can maybe tire Gautier out and kind of win with volume and takedown attempts. However, when you look at this, the skill set between these two, the gap there is just too much for me to pick Medina. Gautier hits harder. Medina is very hittable. I say Gautier puts him out with a shot. I'll say he does in the very first round. Give me Gautier to win his UFC debut by first round TKO.
Next up at UFC Mexico City, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, the top prelim is a men's flyweight contest between Edgar Chairez and CJ Vergara. Chairez, the 29-year-old Mexican, is 11-6 with 1 no contest overall. He is 1-2 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as a veteran of Fury Fighting Championship and of Season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He actually lost on the Contender Series back in 2022, went and won a couple of fights in Texas, got the call up, and as I said, he is 1-2 with 1 no contest since then, and he's coming in off a loss. He dropped a unanimous decision to Josh Van at Noche UFC last September. So he'll look to bounce back from that against Vergara. Vergara, 33-year-old Texan, 12-6-1 overall, 3-4 since joining the UFC, also out of Fury and Contender Series. He fought on Season 5 of the Contender Series and was the outgoing Fury flyweight champ at the time he joined the UFC back in 2021. Since then, 3-4, and he is coming in on a 2-fight skid, which represents the first losing streak of any kind of his professional career. those would be both of his octagon appearances of 2024, as he dropped a decision to Asu Almabayev in March at UFC 299, then came back at UFC Fight Night Royval versus Tyra in October and got knocked out by Ramazanbek Temirov. So he'll be looking to snap that losing streak. He's not favored to get it done, as Chairez is a comfortable minus 275. Vergara out there around plus 235 as the underdog.
CJ Vergara is a guy that been in the UFC for a while. He likes to kind of confuse his opponents by constantly switching stances. He's a pressure striker, constantly on the gas. He beats fighters with his output. He gets in the pocket and he unloads big shots. He can telegraph his shots by loading up way too much. I like his kicking game. He's got hard body kicks. He uses, he uses. Sorry, I'm messing up. Sorry. He closes the distance and grinds in the clinch. He showed a great clinch striking by dropping Bruno Correa with knees to the body in their fight. Due to his aggressive style, he eats a lot of punches. He's been hurt a lot. I mean, we just saw him get smashed by Temirov. He looks to wrestle, but he's not a great wrestler. He's also like a weak defensive wrestler. I don't hate his overall grappling though. He's more of a controller than a submission threat. I mean, he doesn't have a single submission. I don't think he has a submission win on his record. He was also quickly subbed by Tatsuro Taira. His submission defense is still pretty good. He has great cardio and heart, and he really won't stop coming. Move over to Chairez. Chairez is really big for the weight class. He's a good striker. He uses his footwork well. Does a lot of L step in to kind of cut angles and avoid strikes. But his footwork is good, but his head movement isn't. He doesn't move his head enough to avoid strikes. As far as offensively, I like his jab. He's got a solid jab. He hits hard. He'll throw some spinning attacks. He's got a big kicking game. They'll throw some naked leg kicks. He likes to get to the fight to the ground, but again, I wouldn't call him a wrestler at all. He's also more of a grappler, but he's the opposite. He is a submissioner. He's got 7 subs on his record. He recently subbed Daniel Lacerda. He's got solid submission defense. Prediction, this one's tough because both guys have kind of shown flashes of things I've liked. I think both guys have also been extremely inconsistent. I'm going to go with Chairez simply because he has more avenues to victory. I mean, he could hurt Vergara, who has durability issues and durability questions. And if he's the one I think most likely to take the fight to the ground and help him, bank some rounds in that part. Plus, he could lock in a submission. I say he doesn't get a submission, but I think the ground advantage gives him a win. Give me Chairez by decision.
I agree with Keith definitely about the overall tenor of this fight. Edgar Chairez has had he's not been done a whole lot of favors by the UFC. And there are a couple of fighters on this card that you can say that about. Like, we'll be talking about Kevin Borjas in a few minutes, but yeah, Edgar Chairez has lost to Tatsuro Taira and Josh Van since he's been in the UFC. There are probably only 7 or 8 flyweights on the entire roster that I would feel very comfortable saying, yeah, that guy would beat Josh Van and Tatsuro Taira, like, no problem. So Chairez, he's had some challenging matchmaking. Vergara is a step down from Josh Van and Tatsuro Taira. He's a step up from Daniel Lacerda. As Keith said, both these guys has been inconsistent. But if both of them fight to their best advantage, I think Chairez is better almost everywhere. Vergara might be the harder hitter on a shot-for-shot basis, but if one guy knocks out the other, I think it's actually more likely to be Chairez. I think he's better at throwing in combination. He's better at taking advantage when things are going his way on the feet. I've seen Vergara wait too long for the perfect shot, load up too much, and then the ground game, I think, favors Chairez as well. Vergara, he's always been a big, strong flyweight. He's always been a marginal athlete, at least by the standards of the men's 125-pound division. And at 33, with a bunch of hard fights, both in the UFC and regionally behind him, that may even be starting to slip. Whereas Chairez is probably just coming into his prime right now. I've got Chairez in this one, and I'm going to say he gets it, the submission, actually. Give me Chairez to get a third round submission after, I don't know, 12, 13 minutes of what will deserve to be fight of the night, even if it doesn't win it. I think this will be an absolute barn burner of a fight. I think both guys will have their moments, even though I'm picking Chairez, and even though Chairez is almost a 3-1 favorite. Vergara tends to have his moments in all of his fights, just not quite enough of them. Give me Chairez to get the tap out in the third round, delight the fans, but would not be at all surprised if he had dropped one of the 2 rounds leading into that. The 6-fight main card of UFC on ESPN 64 begins with a men's flyweight matchup between Ronaldo Rodriguez and Kevin Borjas. Rodriguez, the 25-year-old Mexican, is 17-2 overall. He's 0-2, he's 2-0 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Season 4 of Dana White's Contender Series. He actually lost on the Contender Series, went back to Mexico, won 4 straight fights in a row, most of them in Lux Fighting Championship, before getting the call up a little over a year ago. Since then, he has wins over Denise Bondar. He tapped him out back in February, then came back at Noche UFC in September and took a unanimous decision over Ode Osborne. He'll look to make it 3 in a row in the UFC, 7 in a row overall against Borjas. Borjas, 27-year-old Peruvian, 9-3 overall, 0-2 since joining the UFC out of Season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought just once last year. It was at UFC 301, and he got knocked out in the second round by Alessandro Costa. He'll look for his first official UFC win here. He is not favored to do so, but the line is fairly close, as Rodriguez is minus 170, Borjas plus 140. I'm going to flip this to Keith for his take on this fight.
All right, next up, Kevin Borjas versus Ronaldo Rodriguez. Borjas, he's a high output striker. He tries to press the action at his foe. That's why he hated the pressure from Joshua Van. But in fairness, I've said this before, Joshua Van is a future UFC champion, so that loss is not going to age too poorly in the next couple of years. He's got some fairly quick hands. I like his accuracy. He's got some nice snap on his shots. He's got a nice jab, follows with a good straight right. It's short. It's very clean. He's got some good zip on his shots. I like his step-in knees. Not the best defense, though. He's willing to eat a shot to land a bomb of his own. He can sometimes overthrow, leaving himself to be countered. He's open to leg kicks. Alessandro Costa basically stopped him with just leg kicks. Not much of an offensive wrestler. He's a weak defensive wrestler. Struggles to get off the bottom. He has good cardio to go all 15 minutes, which is good. Especially unique cardio in this division. Rodriguez, he's only 25 years old, so I love that. He's at the age where he can kind of continue to make huge jumps improvement. I see he's a really good striker. He marches down his foe with constant pressure. He mixes up his stance, kind of get his opponents guessing. He's got great volume, quick hands. He throws hard shots, big hooks. He will load up a little too much, kind of telegraph his shots. But when he lands, he's got good power. He really steps into shots. He's got 7 TKOs already, and not even in his power years yet. He's a hold your ground type striker. He doesn't really back up when he's being pressured. He's going to kind of meet you at the point of contact. His boxing style leaves him heavy on his front foot, so he can get his leg kicked out. He also lacks head movement. That's something he needs to clean up. He's a solid wrestler. He likes to wrestle too. And he gets the fight to the ground. He's a good grappler, good top game. He's got 5 subs on his record. He jumped guillotine in a recent fight, and it was super fast. If he gets taken down, he's extremely active. He's looking for subs, sweeps, scrambling. He subbed Bondar in his UFC debut. So Borjas actually might be the more technical fighter on the feet, but he doesn't have the KO ability that Rodriguez has. The big issue is the gap in the ground game. I think Rodriguez takes him down with ease. I think Borjas makes the mistake on the ground. When the fight hits the ground, I think Borjas will make a mistake, and I think he gets subbed. Give me Rodriguez by submission.
I'm with Keith here, and I'm leaning Ronaldo Rodriguez more firmly than the straight money line would seem to indicate. And I feel bad saying that because I think Borjas is a good fighter, and I think he's definitely better than his UFC record. I mentioned this in the last segment when talking about Chairez and or talking about Edgar Chairez, like Borjas is 0-2 in the UFC, but he's lost to Josh Van and Nono Costa. If I went through the entire UFC men's flyweight division, there might be 7 or 8 guys that I'd feel very comfortable. Oh yeah, he would beat Josh Van and Nono Costa, no question. Yet that's what Borjas has gotten served right out of the gate. And here it's another one where I favor Rodriguez pretty heavily in this one. And it's, assuming it goes that way, it's a loss that will probably age well for Borjas, as I suspect Rodriguez is about to start climbing up these flyweight rankings. But Borjas may not be around to enjoy that if he opens up his UFC run with 3 straight losses. Here's the thing. Borjas has some things he does very well. He's a good high volume, medium power combination striker on the feet. He may not have as much single shot power as Rodriguez, but you look at his record, he's got a ton of TKOs because he's good at pouring it on. The problem here, and Keith kind of laid it out, is that Borjas does not have great takedown defense. He does not have great grappling defense, and Rodriguez should be able to take advantage of him down there. And unlike, say, Godinez that we talked about earlier on this card, there's no question in my mind, if Rodriguez and his coaches see that obvious path to victory, they're going to take it, or at least do their damnedest. This could be a spectacular crowd igniting fight, but I don't think it is. I think Rodriguez actually makes this look kind of easy. He circumvents what might be an intriguing striking battle between the, rangier, high volume Borjas and Rodriguez, who's a little more compact and explosive. I think he short circuits all of that and takes Borjas down early and often, or at least as often as he needs to get the tap. I'm going to say this makes it out of the first round, but give me Rodriguez by second round submission here. And again, poor Kevin Borjas, we may look back a couple years from now and just realize that he lost his first 3 UFC fights to 3 future top 10 flyweights, maybe 2 of whom are future top 5 flyweights. I'm a believer in Van. I'm at least a provisional believer in Ronaldo Rodriguez, and I think Rodriguez shows out here with that submission. Bantamweights are up next on the UFC Mexico City main card as David Martinez makes his UFC debut against Saimon Oliveira. Martinez, the 26-year-old Mexican, is 11-1 overall. He appeared on Dana White's Contender Series last October, taking a unanimous decision over Xavier Franklin. This will be his UFC debut. He's currently on a 7-fight win streak, which he will attempt to extend to 8 at the expense of Oliveira. Oliveira, 33-year-old Brazilian, 18-5 overall, 0-2 since joining the UFC out of Season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He has not fought in over 2 years, and the last time we saw him, he got crushed with a second-round body shot by Daniel Marcos. That was all the way back at UFC 283 in January of 2023. So he's still looking for his first UFC win. To say he is not favored to do so would be an understatement, as Martinez is a minus 400 favorite, Oliveira plus 300 as your underdog. Okay, so 2 things are true. One thing that's true is that I think David Martinez is a very exciting addition to the UFC bantamweight division and has the potential to be a top 10 contender within the next 2 or 3 years. And that's something that, if you're a longtime listener of this show, you know that Keith and I are both very hesitant to say in the bantamweight division. There's just, you got to do so much, and you have to beat such a variety of differently skilled, well-conditioned athletes to break into the top 10 of the UFC men's bantamweight division. Martinez appears to have that potential. So that's one thing that I think is true. The other thing that I think is true is that this is about as cynical as the matchmaking on this card gets. And I have no problem with that. Like, I think MMA in general and the UFC in particular could stand to take a page out of boxing's playbook, where if you're in a promising prospect in boxing, you don't fight anybody with a pulse until you're 15-0. So for them to take someone in Oliveira who has not proven that he's UFC material, has been out for 2 years, and oh, by the way, is at a terrible stylistic disadvantage against Martinez. It's cynical. It's an obvious play to get the debuting Mexican a big knockout win in front of the hometown fans, and I am here for it. Martinez, he is a compact, burly, explosive striker who throws his fair share of exotic techniques, perhaps more than his fair share. It might be to his detriment. That's something he might have to tone down eventually as he runs into sterner competition. But how he's looked so far, in Combate, on the Contender Series, I think at worst, he pans out as a bantamweight Drew Dober type, and at best, maybe he pans out as a bantamweight Rafael Fiziev type, where both of those guys are short for the division, not great reach for the division, but aggressive, powerful, fast Muay Thai strikers with really good knockout power, especially by the standards of the division in which they compete. Like I say, and I believe Keith says this on his segment, Martinez might throw a little too much spinning stuff. But along with the two comparisons I made, maybe throw in a little Michel Pereira in there, where he has to figure out which of the crazy techniques he can keep in his arsenal and not, be made to look silly by UFC level fighters, and which he has to leave behind. But I don't think we're going to find any of that out against Oliveira. Oliveira's a good grappler, and he's a good grappler from guard as well as top position. Not a very good wrestler, which means he lacks ways to get the fight to the ground at the place, time, and position of his choosing. And while he's going to be taller and almost certainly have reach on Martinez, he's not good at taking advantage of a reach advantage. Like, he's a Muay Thai style striker himself, but just nothing resembling the crispness or power of Martinez. And again, his best wins have come in the fights where he's been able to lean on his grappling. I think he's going to have rough sledding against Martinez here. If he tries to engage in a pure stand-up battle, I think Martinez's difference in speed, accuracy, and power are going to tell quickly. And if Oliveira realizes that his best chance at a win is to test Martinez's largely untested ground game, I think it may turn bad for him even quicker. I could see Martinez just catching him with something nasty on the way in, or shucking him off out of the clinch and just punishing him. Give me Martinez by first round knockout in a performance that will electrify the crowd, get the UFC booth into full hyperbole mode, but probably not teach us a whole lot about either fighter. And that's okay. We can learn more about him when he fights in the Apex 4 months from now. But for now, the UFC is going to be very happy to have David Martinez, I think.
Next, we got Saimon Oliveira versus David Martinez, another guy making his UFC debut. I'll start with Oliveira. He's a Muay Thai striker. He has really good volume. He's constantly on the gas. He can be really wild with his power shots. And he throws way too many spinning attacks, just no control of them. I don't mind a guy who does a lot of spinning. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm not the biggest fan of spinning attacks. I'm a fan of spinning attacks when they land. They're fun as hell, but I don't think they're as effective. And he's a guy who does it a lot. He can also overreach when he's charging at his foe without any setups, kind of leave him to be countered. He wants to be the one moving forward. He hated being pressured back by Marcos, but anybody who's been listening to the show knows I'm pretty high on Marcos. He lacks defense. He mostly piddles, which is probably my least favorite striking defense when it comes to MMA striking. He has a big kicking game though, a lot of teep kicks, likes to throw calf kicks. He will wrestle. He'll try to wrestle a lot. He'll try to kind of sneak in takedowns, but he isn't very good at wrestling. He kind of just dives in with no setups at all. If he gets to the fight down, I like his top game. He advances position on the ground, and he's got 11 subs on his record. Move over to David Martinez. I'm sure Ben will mention that he's the brother of Melissa Martinez, but I'll throw it out there just in case he doesn't mention that. Very athletic guy, good footwork. He's a guy who gets in and gets out kind of style. He wants to land and get out. He also he stays on the outside and he closes distance really quickly. He uses a lot of feints to set up his shots. He's got high output. He uses his movement to try to get his opponents to chase him and move him like kind of directly into his right hand. He's got a really good right hand. I like his lead left hook too. He's, for a young guy, he has got nice power. He's got 9 TKOs. He'll also throw out some spinning attacks. He's got a big kicking game, nice switch kick. He likes this like lead hook kick, very like Taekwondo style with that. He loves to attack the cast with kicks. We saw that a lot in the Contender Series matchup. But not much of an offensive wrestler, but a decent defensive wrestler, good takedown defense. He has no subs on his record, but his cardio is like very good. Almost like insane, like how much output he can put out there. The Contender Series fight, he wasn't slowing down at all, and he had a lot of volume in that fight. I think it's a really fun fight. I'm going to guess Martinez is the favorite. And I think he should be for a guy making his UFC debut. He has more variety in his striking of the two. He's definitely the more technical fighter. I expect him to fight off takedown attempts from Oliveira and then batter him with superior technique on the feet. I'd say watch out for those calf kicks. Give me Martinez. I'm gonna say it's a pretty easy decision. I'm gonna say he blows him out. Give me Martinez by blowout decision to get the Martinez family rolling.
We stay in the bantamweight division as Raul Rosas Jr. faces off against Vince Morales. Rosas, the 20-year-old American, is 10-1 overall. He is 4-1 since joining the UFC out of Season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's won 3 straight fights since his lone career loss. He dropped a unanimous decision to Christian Rodriguez a little under 2 years ago at UFC 287. Since then, he has wins over Terrence Mitchell, Ricky Tercios, and Aoriqi Leng. The most recent of those, the Aoriqi Leng fight, was at Noche UFC last September. It was a unanimous decision. Crowd went wild. Kind of like I mentioned off the top, he's one of those fighters that, he is a Mexican-American, but the Mexican crowd definitely seems to cherish him as one of its own. He'll look to delight the crowd once again at the expense of Morales. Morales, 34-year-old Idahoan by way of Nevada, 16-9 overall. He is 3-7 across 2 separate stints in the UFC. He's 0-2 since returning just last September. He got the call back after putting together a 5-fight win streak in various regional promotions. In fact, no. Okay, one was in Ryzen and then 4 regional promotions. But yeah, he won 5 straight fights in 5 different promotions before getting the call back last fall. But it was right back to more of the same, as he has lost decisions to Taylor Lapalus and Elijah Smith since getting the call back. So 3-7 in the UFC. He will look to avoid going 3-8. He is not favored to do so, as Rosas Jr. is minus 375, Morales plus 280. This is another somewhat cynical piece of matchmaking, and once again, I have no problem with it at all. Raul Rosas Jr. is 20 years old. 20 years old, and yeah, he's now lost a fight in the UFC. Christian Rodriguez Christian Rodriguez kind of brought him back to earth, showed some holes in his game, showed some things that he needed to work on, but guess what? He's worked on those things. He's 3-0 since the loss to Rodriguez, and the main problem in the Rodriguez fight was that he got tired first, and once he got tired, he was no longer able to dictate where the fight took place. That's not been a problem since then. He ran right over Terrence Mitchell. He definitely controlled the fight against Tercios until he finished him pretty much at his leisure. And there was no question who was in control in the Auri Chilang fight. So you can't ask more than that. You take your first loss, you go back to the drawing board, you fix the things that lost you that fight. I like that they matched him against Morales. I think it's a very advantageous style matchup for Rosas. Well, for one, while I think Morales is better than his UFC record indicates, he has been competitive in most of those 7 losses. He's 3-7 in the UFC. Like, it's an open question whether he belongs in the UFC at all. So what's he doing fighting a guy that's kind of knocking on the outskirts of the top 15? I don't know, except to serve the Mexico City crowd. Here's the problem. Raul Rosas Jr. is an improving striker who's gotten very good at using his speed, his fluidity, his natural reach advantage. But what he's best at is grappling. He is a fantastic submission grappler and a good, if unconventional, takedown artist. And Morales is one of those guys who he's a solid offensive fighter, but he has big lapses in defense on the feet. He has big lapses in defense on the ground. And I would argue his main problem, the thing that's gotten him to 3-7 in the UFC and already gotten him cut once, maybe twice after Saturday, is that he has those defensive liabilities and he's not good at controlling fights and steering them away from the places where he's weakest. And in terms of grappling in particular, he has a little bit of that Michael Chiesa vibe, where Chiesa is a fantastic offensive grappler. I mean, his highlight reel is one of a kind, but then he is also been taken advantage of on the ground and had defensive lapses on the ground that have gotten him tapped out or at least controlled by guys that may not even be as talented as he is. Morales has a bit of that as well. Like, his submission wins have been fantastic. I mean, I mentioned that he won 5 in a row before getting the call back to the UFC. Amid that, there was, I think, a Peruvian necktie and an anaconda choke. Like, he has a nice arsenal of offensive techniques. He's good at spotting offensive opportunities in scrambles, taking what his opponents give him. But then he's been tapped out multiple times in the UFC. And here, his best bet would be to kind of, I think, do a sprawl and brawl type special against Rosas. Morales might actually be the harder hitter. And if he tried to keep things on the feet at all costs and just hope that Rosas gets tired or frustrated, or at best just kind of hope to eke out, a 2 rounds to 1 decision or even a split decision, that might be his best route to victory. But like I said, I don't trust Morales to try and steer fights to his best advantage. I think he'll probably willingly get into scramble heavy grappling exchanges with Rosas. And while Morales is capable of catching people in those situations, Rosas can do that as well. Plus, Rosas, as he's gotten older, gotten stronger, gotten more experienced, has also gotten better at shutting down the wild Tasmanian devil scramble situations. A good example is Morales' win over my guy, Ricky Tercios, last June. Earlier in Rosas' career, that fight could have been a lot closer because Tercios, kind of like Morales, is happy to get into a wild scramble battle and just trusts his instincts and his athleticism to come out on top. And by the time they met last year, Rosas was having none of it. Like, he dominated Tercios on the ground. I could see that happening here. I think Morales probably engages Rosas willingly on the ground, and it's to his detriment. Give me Rosas to tap out Morales in the second round after putting it on him pretty bad in the first round. Yeah.
All right. Raul Rosas Jr. versus Vince Morales. Rojas Jr., I mean, this guy, I still don't think this guy gets enough credit. I mean, the dude is only 20 years old. I mean, the dude can't even have a Modelo in America. I mean, it's crazy. I've talked about it before. The thing that stands out to me most, besides his skill set, is just how mentally strong he is for a kid who's 20 years old fighting the UFC. I mean, that's really nuts. And what I like about him, he's showing in me improvements that you can expect from a young fighter. I mean, in each fight, I expect to continue to see him jump in, and I see him continue adding new skills to his game. Big improvements recently has been his boxing. He already fights out of both stances. He has good output. He looked faster in his last fight. His striking just overall looked better. He still throws some looping punches. I think he needs to clean that up a little bit. But he's starting to show signs of power. I mean, and the funny thing is the guy is likely 10 years away from his power years. He kicked a lot in his last fight, which is another big addition to his skill set. That wasn't really his thing. He likes throwing like flying attacks, Superman punches and knees and stuff, which is more fun. He's an okay wrestler, though I think I've seen some signs where he's making improvements overall in his wrestling. If he gets the fight to the ground, he's a very good top, grappler. He moves, to a better position once it's the ground. And it's kind of the era that he's just super seasoned when he came in already in the UFC. He's a very good BJJ practitioner, great back takes. He's got hard ground and pound. He is a submission artist. I think he has 6 or 7 subs in his record. He's got 2 or 3 already in the UFC. I mean, he almost hit a Sulov stretch already in the UFC. He does chase submission, and that's a thing that I think is worrisome because when he does that, he'll lose position. So that's something he might need to clean up a little bit. But there's just certain guys who do that. I mean, I think like Charles Oliveira is arguably the greatest grappler in UFC history, and he's a guy that would do something like that. So that's something that just he's a risk taker. So maybe that's always going to be the case. He also isn't a very good defensive wrestler. He slowed down against Christian Rodriguez, but his cardio looked much better in his last fight. Move over to Vince Morales. Vince Morales, he's a counter striker. He likes to slip and rip. He did struggle with the hand speed of Elijah Smith, though. For a guy that slips, he doesn't really do it that well. He's still very hittable. His offensive striking isn't bad, though. He's accurate. He has plus power. Not much of a kicker. He also doesn't check leg kicks. Jonathan Martinez destroyed his legs in their fight, but I mean, that's a big step up from Rose, or at least it should be at this point in Rojas' career. He looks to wrestle a lot. He's got fast entries, pretty good at winning scrambles. Though he's a weak defensive wrestler, he has 2 subs on his record, but he also has been subbed 3 times himself. So as far as prediction goes, I think Morales is a tricky fighter. I think he is a more skilled fighter than his UFC record would suggest. I think he's got a lot of skills, but I've really starting to be sold on Rojas. I expect him to continue to improve. I think Rojas will get the fight to the ground. I think he takes his back. I think he catches Morales in the mission. Give me Rojas by second round submission, and we get another shoo-wee-wee. All right, that was for my boy Felix, one of my daughter's softball coaches. He loves Rojas and the shoo-wee-wee.
Third from the top at UFC Mexico City is a middleweight matchup between Kelvin Gastelum and Joe Pyfer. Gastelum, the 33-year-old Arizona native, is 19-9 with 1 no contest overall. He's 13-9 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as the middleweight winner of season 17 of The Ultimate Fighter. It's worth noting that he has competed at welterweight as well as middleweight, so while he's 13-9 with 1 no contest overall, he is 7-7 with 1 no contest at middleweight. Effectively, he is a 500 fighter at middleweight, and he is like 6-2 below middleweight. So aside from the fact that he missed weight twice at middleweight, there's no question in which division he's more competitive. At any rate, he is coming in off a win, and it is a win at middleweight even if it was against a fellow habitual welterweight in Daniel Rodriguez. They fought at UFC on ABC, Whitaker versus Alaskarov last June, and Gastelum picked up a unanimous decision. So he'll look to make it 2 in a row. And for the record, he has not won consecutive fights in the UFC in almost 7 years. You have to go all the way back to him retiring Michael Bisping and eking out a split decision over Jacare Souza back in early 2018 for the last time Gastelum won back-to-back fights. He'll try to do it here against Pyfer. Pyfer, 28-year-old Pennsylvanian, 13-3 overall, 4-1 since joining the UFC as a 2-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on season 4, fell victim to a kind of freakish elbow injury against Dustin Stoltzfus. He recovered from that, won a fight in Cage Fury Fighting Championships, came back on season 6 of the Contender Series, knocked out Ozzy Diaz, got signed to the UFC, and he is 4-1 since then. He won his last time out. It was at UFC 303 last June. He knocked out Marc-Andre Barriault in the first round. That allowed him to bounce back from his first UFC loss, where he lost a decision to Jack Hermanson in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 236 last February. He's looking for his second straight win here, same as Gastelum. Pyfer is favored to get it done. He is minus 300, Gastelum plus 240. I will flip this one to Keith for his pick.
All right. Next, Kelvin Gastelum versus Joe Pyfer. This is a big fight. Gastelum, I mean, he's 33 years old, which is crazy considering he wasn't as young as Rojas, but he's been in the UFC so long. I think he might as well be 63 years old. I feel like I've been watching this guy for 20 years now. He got a win in his last fight, but this dude still lost 6 out of 9 fights and back up to middleweight. And, his last fight was at middleweight, but I still think this guy would be better at welterweight than middleweight. I mean, middleweight's a weaker overall division, but this guy's too small. The problem is this dude cheats on his diet more than I do. I mean, and I quit my mid-morning. I'm quitting my diet. So I start another one tomorrow. It'll be by like 10 o'clock. I'll be like, oh man, I got to get some freaking fruit snacks or something to me. I don't know. And his motivation, I've always, you've heard about this guy, lack of motivation. We've heard countless stories of him slacking off, slew of injuries. I mean, he came up like such a piece of garbage in his last fight, making Danny Rodriguez move up to 185 the day of the fight. Despite that, he's still, it's on him. He's undersized for the division. And then add in the injuries that probably taken off some years of his prime. What I've seen him, he's a southpaw. He's a lot more athletic than he looks. I mean, dude looks like he should be doing, working the graveyard shift, security at the local hospital, making $12 an hour. But he's not. He's a good athlete. He moves well. He's got some quick hands, kind of fights and bursts, sets up his shots, and uses feints well. His volume is inconsistent. We've had fights where he hasn't matched his opponent's volume. I go like the Darren Till fight. But his volume against Danny Rodriguez was actually pretty good. He has a solid jab. He likes his overhand left. Though he can overthrow it, leave himself to be countered. He really steps into his shots. And I'd say he has good power, but, I mean, he isn't the power puncher that the broadcast team would pretend he is. I mean, the dude hasn't got a knockout since the Michael Bisping fight back in 2017. At least I think that is. Double check his record. I could be wrong there. But if not, he hasn't had more than 1 or 2 since then. He did have success against Danny Rodriguez with calf kicks, though he's open to calf kicks himself. He's above average wrestler. As he's gotten older, he uses wrestling less and less. But though I do like that he wrestled a lot against Danny Rodriguez. When taken down against Sean Brady, he couldn't get off the bottom. But let's be honest, nobody can get Sean Brady off of him. I mean, he was subbed by Sean Brady, but again, that dude is such a freaking stud and so hot right now. I mean, obviously just beat up Leon Edwards, which is such a great win last week. He's taken a lot of damage over the years and still shown that he has a good chin, really hasn't been hurt too much. Move over to Joe Pyfer. Pyfer is such a huge middleweight. I mean, he could easily be fighting at light heavyweight. He's a boxer on the feet. He wants to be the one moving forward. Go back to like the Jack Hermanson fight. He hated the pressure in Jack Hermanson in that fight. When he's letting his hands go, he's got a good power jab. He follows it up with power shots down the pipe. He attacks with combination. His left hook is his best punch. Though his overhand right is still pretty good too. He works the body a lot, which I like. He has serious punching power. I mean, he can end the fight with one single blow. He knows that he can end the fight so easily one shot that he will like almost throw too many big punches trying to land that big knockout shot. So that's a little concerning. I like his leg kicks. I mean, he's got some hard thudding calf kicks. He isn't a bad wrestler at all. I mean, you think of Joe Piper as a big puncher, but I mean, the guy's a good grappler. He's got some quick entries. He's very physically strong and grab a leg and tosses his opponent to the canvas. His overall grappling is very slick. Got some great back takes. He's hit a super slick head and arm choke. I think he's got 3 or 4 subs on his record. Defensively, you put him on his back. He struggled to get off the bottom against Jack Hermanson. I like Piper here. I'm assuming he's going to be one of the bigger favorites on the card. I just think he's a bad matchup for Gastelum. There's going to be a huge size advantage for Piper. Gastelum has a hell of a chin on him, but I think it finally fails him. I'm going to say Piper has the biggest win of his career. Not just who he beat, but also how he does it. I think he puts out Gastelum. I say he's going to do it in the second round. Give me Piper by second round TKO.
I wish we had more disagreement to spice things up for y'all here, but I'm with Keith again. It is. I'm not sure whether I'm surprised that Kelvin Gastelum is already 33 or that he's only 33. Just, he was a 21-year-old in the tough house. And he's now been in the UFC for over a decade. And yeah, in the division in which he chooses to compete, he's a 500 fighter. By that standard, you got to consider him a disappointment. I mean, he has a couple of really good wins at middleweight. There have been times that when he looked fantastic, but there have also been times that he's lost, and it was just really, really screamingly obvious that it was because he wasn't big enough. So I don't know if he'd had different discipline, different strength and conditioning coaches, different dietitian, and had been at welterweight this whole time, who knows? We might be having a different conversation about the guy now. But here at age 33, and a pretty old 33 if we're being honest, he is who he is. He's still a solid boxer with pretty fast hands and decent power. He's still a decent offensive wrestler, even at 185. And while a lot of Gastelum's opponents are bigger than him, when he really gets his wrestling going, it doesn't make a difference. I mean, Ian Heinisch is built like a tank, and Gastelum threw him all over the place. So Gastelum is still capable of beating people in the UFC middleweight division. I don't think Joe Pyfer is one of them. Pyfer, he was an intriguing prospect when he joined the UFC, and he's only gotten more so. Like, I'm not put off by his loss to Jack Hermanson last year. Hermanson is a super, super wily, tough veteran. He is the walking definition of a trap fight for someone like Pyfer, who is young, aggressive, raw, and thus to that point in his career had really not even faced much resistance. Hermanson was just the perfect guy, especially in Pyfer's first 5-round fight, to kind of show him what's up. I expect that Pyfer has come back better from that and will continue to come back better from that. It's hard to tell based on him lamping Marc-Andre Barriault in 90 seconds. We might learn more here, considering he's taking on someone in Gastelum that, despite fighting the best of what 2 different UFC divisions have had to offer him over the last 12 years, has never been stopped via strikes. Keith picked that to change on Saturday. So did our friend Devin Tejada of the Check the Kick podcast. Make it 3 for 3. I'm always a little nervous picking something to happen that I've never seen happen before, but I could see this being it. This is a fight where there's just not going to be any safe place for Gastelum. Pyfer is aggressive, capable of throwing big power at all ranges. Like he's nasty inside with uppercuts and elbows and knees. He's nasty at range, kicking to the body, kicking to the head, kicking to the legs, which is something that Gastelum is often susceptible to. And while I don't know if Pyfer is a better technical wrestler than Gastelum, the combination of Pyfer being as good a wrestler as he is and younger and so much bigger and stronger than Gastelum, it will make him the more effective wrestler in the cage. So if they go to the ground, it probably isn't going to be where, when, and how Gastelum wants it. Yeah. I'd call this a passing of the torch moment, but if we're being honest, Gastelum isn't really holding much of a torch. I think this is more of just Pyfer continuing to get back on track after the Hermansson loss and show that he is not just a future contender at 185, but a now contender. Give me Pyfer by, I'm going to say, third round TKO. And by the time they get there, Gastelum is battered. Pyfer has outlanded him. Gastelum's lumped up. If Gastelum has tried his wrestling, he's probably something like 1 for 7 on his takedowns. Give me Pyfer to hurt Gastelum, follow him to the ground, pound him out down there. Third round TKO, and the first time we've seen Kelvin Gastelum stopped on strikes. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC on ESPN 64, a lightweight contest between Manuel Torres and Drew Dober. Torres, the 30-year-old Mexican, is 15-3 overall. He's 3-1 since joining the UFC out of Season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. After starting his UFC run with 3 straight first-round finishes, he ran into Ignacio Bahamondes at Noche UFC last September. That fight ended in a first-round finish. Unfortunately, it was for Bahamondes, who punched Torres out late in the first frame. He will look to bounce back from that loss at the expense of the veteran Dober. 36-year-old Nebraska native training out of Colorado is 27-14 with 1 no contest overall. He's 13-10 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight losing streak dating back to the beginning of last year. He dropped a unanimous decision to Hinata Moicano last February, then came back in July at UFC on ESPN, Namajunas versus Cortez, and got hammered by John Silva into a doctor stoppage TKO in the 3rd round. So at age 36, he will look to turn things around, start up a new win streak. He is not favored to do so, but this is actually the closest line on the card, as Torres is minus 120, Dober even money plus 100. Let's have a listen at how Keith sees this fight playing out.
All right, next, Drew Dober versus Manuel Torres. Dober, we kind of know what we got with Dober at this point. We've seen him so many times, and it's a pleasure to see him. I love Drew Dober fights. He's a southpaw. He's a really great striker, constantly taking the ground and pressuring his opponent. He's constantly setting up his straight left by stepping on the outside of the center, with their feet line up, kind of winning the outside foot battle, lining up his punches. He measures his shots really well. He's accurate. He's good at slipping shots and then landing his own counter, drawing out attacks well with feints. Big issue, though, I have is, and we saw this against Gene Silva, I think he's starting to show signs of slowing down. I mean, some of that might be just because Gene Silva is super fast. But, he's been in the UFC for a while, so that could be, something we could see. He works the body really well. I mean, he had a lot of success against Rafael Alves with body shots. He's one of the pound-for-pound hardest hitters in the sport, and he can change any fight. He has changed so many fights by landing big shots. That's because he keeps his base underneath him. I mean, he's also like just a stocky kind of guy. You just look at him and just tell he's a guy who's really strong. He can tend to chase the KO sometimes, throwing so hard and just kind of instead of just flowing it and having the knockout come to him. He can't wrestle. I mean, my 10-year-old son can take him down. We know that. He's a terrible defensive wrestler. For a guy, he's been in the UFC a long time. He's taken a lot of damage. I mean, he was knocked out by Matt Frivola. He was smashed by Gene Silva, Terrence McKinney landed big shots on Barry Green, landed big shots on him. So all these years against top level guys, you're worried about when his durability will ultimately fail. Mederos, I mean, he's a huge guy for the weight class. He's long and lanky. He's a very aggressive striker. Though he won't set up his attacking and just blitzes forward, a little bit like a berserker. But he slows things down. He's got some fast hands. He's got a nice sharp jab. He's got nice power punches. He's got a big kicking game. He uses his teep kicks to keep his distance. He'll even throw like a front kick to the face from distance. His defense and his durability is keeping him from being elite. I mean, he stands tall with his chin high in the air. I mean, he was briefly hurt by Chris Duncan. He was hurt bad by Ignacio Bahamondes in their fight. He isn't just a striker, though. He's a very good grappler, though I wouldn't call him a good offensive wrestler. He can get some takedowns, but usually he uses his size, kind of use those long arms to grab a body lock. He's got slick back takes, though. He gets to the back quickly with those long legs. He's got 7 subs on the record, and he subs Chris Duncan, which is a win that aged really well. This is a really tough fight because I've always been a big fan of Dober. But I like Torres too. I think both guys are sharp strikers. I hate doing this because I'm such a big fan of Dober. I'm going to take Torres. I think Dober is declining, and I expect his slide to kind of be fast. I say Torres gets the better exchanges. I think Dober will have his moments. I don't think his decline will be completely overnight. Even though I did say it was going to be fast, I think he'll still be competitive in this fight. For the kicks, the length, I have Torres winning a very close decision. I think we have a war on our hands, but give me Torres to win that war. Torres by decision.
In the broad strokes, I see this matchup a lot like Keith does. I think I may be a little more concerned than he is about Dober declining hard and fast. For a long time, for the first who knows how many years of Dober's UFC run, the route to victory over him was pretty well laid out. Take the guy down. I remember kind of making the joke about this when Keith and I started this show like 5 years ago, that Dober looks wrestly. Like when you see a guy that's a blocky, stocky, muscular guy from Nebraska with cauliflower ear, you assume, oh, that dude must be a good wrestler. And it was quite the opposite. You know, Dober was this flashy knockout artist kickboxer who actually had terrible takedown defense. And for the first 10 or 12 fights of his UFC run in particular, most of his losses were just people took him down, made it look pretty easy, and he struggled to get back up. But in fights that were conducted entirely or primarily on the feet, he could knock anybody out on any given Saturday. I think his takedown defense has actually improved a little bit. His get-up game has improved a little bit. But at the same time, his top gear has slipped just a little. He used to be faster and harder hitting than just about everyone he took on. It made up for the fact that he gave up reach to a lot of them. But I think he's slowed just a little bit. I think his durability has waned just a little bit. Like we saw him got knocked flat by Matt Frivola, and that was like 2 years ago. He used to be this like just whirling dervish of kicks and punches, and he wasn't super easy to hit, but he was good at kind of rolling with stuff and just coming out ahead in those kind of wildfire fights. He doesn't reliably win those firefights anymore. And this fight, for as long as it's on the feet, I think we're going to get some wild exchanges. And I just don't know if I trust Dober's chin and reflexes to carry him through them like they did maybe 5 years ago. Add to that the fact that, well, Torres isn't a lights out wrestler in the conventional, American amateur wrestler sense. He's a very good grappler, and he's a big guy with long arms that finds ways to get fights to the ground. I do think this will be a wild and wildly entertaining fight for as long as it goes, but I see routes to victory for Torres on the feet as well as on the ground. I don't think Torres is as good as Dober was at his very best. Like, Dober for several years there was a borderline top 10 fighter, which is pretty impressive for such a pure specialist in a division as deep as the UFC lightweight division. I think Dober has slipped from that peak, and I think Torres is catching him at the right time. I could see Torres getting a decision in a great, fun, lightweight scrap like Keith seems to be predicting, but I could also see Torres starting to make it ugly. This could be the fight where Dober goes from slipping to all the way slipped, and I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb and say that despite this fight being the closest one on the card in terms of the odds, it looks a little more lopsided than that in the cage. I won't pick the finish here, though they wouldn't shock me, but give me Torres to beat Dober up pretty good, to be the clear winner in the exchanges on the feet, and or for him to have had Dober in serious trouble on the ground. With that, we come to the main event of UFC Mexico City, a flyweight matchup between former champ Brandon Moreno and former title challenger Steve Erceg. Moreno, the 31-year-old Mexican, is 22-8-2 overall. He is 11-5-2 in the UFC. He is coming in off a win. He took a unanimous decision over Amir Albazi in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 246 last November. That allowed him to snap a 2-fight losing streak against Alexandre Pantoja and Brandon Royval. He will look for his second win in a row, look to reinsert himself into the title picture in the flyweight division at the expense of Erceg, who is looking to do the exact same thing. 29-year-old Australian is 12-3 overall. He's 3-2 since joining the UFC less than 2 years ago, believe it or not. The guy sort of took the division by storm. He debuted to relatively little fanfare at UFC 289 in June of 2023, won his first 3 fights in a row, all in pretty dominant fashion, ending with a second-round knockout of Matt Schnell a little over a year ago. That got him into a shot at champ Alexandre Pantoja. That was last May at UFC 301. He came up short there. And in his bounce-back fight, he took on Kai Kara France at UFC 305 last August and got knocked out in the first round. So Erceg has gone from unheralded to title challenger to the onus is on him to prove that the good times were not a fluke, and he is, in fact, a true contender in this division. According to the odds makers, he's not going to get that done, as Moreno is minus 235, Erceg plus 200 as your underdog. I'm going to flip this to Keith for his take on this fight.
Main event, we have Brandon Moreno versus Steve Erceg. What a fight this is. Let's get right into it. Brandon Moreno, well-rounded fighter. They've always talked about how deceivingly long his arms are. His boxing is super good. Wicked good. He's got great footwork. He uses lots of movement. I always think about like the Brandon Royval fight. He was getting him to chase him, and then he was countering. He's got fast hands. He's got a beautiful jab. Everything kind of comes off of it. He's good at throwing that short right hand over his opponent's counter, or his counters, or even like when the opponent jabs, he kind of flipped that right hand right to the top. His lead left is so good. He'll use it, like, obviously he's got that great jab. He's good at dipping and either throwing the left up jab, he'll throw the left hook, or just kind of the short left uppercut. I mean, that left hand is so good. He generates good power because he sits on his punches. He also lines up his shots well by winning the foot battle. He loves like catching a kick, and instead of taking the fight to the ground, trying to counter with a big left hook. His volume has dipped a little. I mean, he refused to match Brandon Royval's output. Too many single strikes, just kind of throwing a lot of limit shots. But I really think that fight's an outlier. I think he just was a off night. and I think he looked good since, and I expect him to look pretty good in this fight. He's got a really good kicking game. He's got a nice high kick. He slips to his left and he throws that high kick to the right. I mean, he crushed. I call it the Robert Whitaker high kick as he did it. He crushed Kai Kara France with a body kick. He's a good defensive striker too, which I tend to be very hard on guys defensively. He moves his head really well off the center line. He kind of has this, really moving, bob and weave and style. He also like Bernard Hopkins shoulder rolls, which, again, not my favorite, but it's not bad. He was using more of a turtle defense against Brandon Royval, which I didn't like. But again, I think we saw it his last fight. He wasn't doing that. So I kind of think it was just such an off night for him in that fight. He doesn't check leg kicks, which is the problem. Figueiredo had a lot of success kicking his leg. He has taken a lot of damage in his career because he's fought everyone. I go back to like the third Figueiredo fight where Figueiredo dropped him a bunch in that fight. I wouldn't call him a wrestler, but he's pretty good at it. Actually, I shouldn't say he's very good at it. He's more of an opportunistic wrestler. He won rounds against Figueiredo due to time and takedowns. He's got some quick entries. He cuts the corner really well. He took Figueiredo down I think he took him down in all 4 fights. He took him down multiple times in their fights. He's good at winning scrambles. If taken down, he's got a very good get-up game. He understands that he can't play jiu-jitsu off his back. He understands. Like, that's one thing I say about Moreno. He knows how important it is to get back up and create a scramble. He loves Grammy rolls to get out. If he's the one on top, he's looking to take you back. He's got some slick back takes. He has the submissions right. He sub Figueiredo in their second fight, which is a really good accomplishment. And he's hard to submit. We saw that against the Pantoja fight. Move over to Urseg. Urseg, I got to pause for a second. Urseg went from arguably winning the UFC flyweight title. I scored the fight for him over Pantoja. It was super close. I got no issues with anybody who scored for Pantoja, but it was super close to now, not that long later, having his back against her after, that loss and then followed up with the Kara France loss. He really needs a win. And this is a tough fight, obviously, with former champion, multiple time former champion Brandon Moreno. He's right. Did he win multiple times? No. Yeah, he won multiple times. I'm sorry. Yeah. He's very big for the weight class. He's a very good boxer. He's got great hand speed, nice jab. He likes to get in the pocket and throw down. He has good power. He also gets inside and he gets mean. He was hitting some step-in elbows against Pantoja in that fight. Defense still needs to improve. It's what's kind of keeping him from being the elite of the division. He stands a little too tall. He lacks head movement. He makes himself very hittable. You just have to worry about his durability after the KO loss to Kai Kara France. Wonder how gun-shy he will be after that loss. He throws a lot of kicks, though he doesn't set them up. He's a decent wrestler. Go back to the David Dvorak fight. He took him down 3 times in that fight. He's also an underrated grappler. He's got some really good BJJ. He's got 6 submission wins. So I paused there for a second. The main event is so good, so I give the UFC credit for that. But on the flip side, I think it's really poor matchmaking. Not from a competitive sense. I think it's going to be super competitive, but I just think the UFC is terrible at rebuilding a person. Ursig should be taking a step down in competition to kind of help him rebound. And instead, he's almost taking a more difficult fight than, at least in the rankings, than when he fought Kai Kara France. Moreno is really good. I think he's on my short list of guys that I enjoy doing film study on. He's so well-rounded. He has so many tools. I think Urseg is very good. I think he's probably a top 5 guy in the division when not going off rankings. Just talent-wise. And sure, I'd have to look at the guys in the division, but you get my statement. I'm very high on him. His offensive boxing is super crisp. However, I still think Moreno has more skills. I think we could have a war if they box with each other. However, one thing about Moreno is the opposite of Lupita Godinez. He'll put himself in the best position to win. And I think Moreno knows that he's not going to just keep it boxing. I think he's going to have him guessing. I think he's going to be kicking the legs. I think he's going to close the distance. I think he's going to wrestle a lot. Arctic's super tough. I don't I think that Kai Kara France was obviously that's a huge knockout win for Kai Kara France, but also I don't think I don't want to say it's an outlier because Kai Kara France is the man, but I'm not worried about his durability. I think that was a like just that's what Kai Kara France can do. Now obviously Moreno can do the same thing. I don't think he will. I think Urseg shows that he's still one of the top guys, but it's still not enough to beat Moreno. Give me Moreno by unanimous decision.
Once again, I would love to make things exciting for y'all by disagreeing vehemently with Keith. Hell, I think this is going to be the first. It might be the first card I've ever previewed for Sure Dog where I didn't pick a single upset, but yeah, I'm leaning Moreno as well. And I want to echo above all else that I'm with Keith on this. I don't love the matchmaking here. I understand Brandon Moreno is one of the more popular fighters in the UFC. Seems to be one of the more beloved guys in the UFC by other fighters as well as by fans. He's certainly the biggest Mexican star in the UFC right now. They want to get him a win in front of an adoring crowd. There are a lot of people they could have chosen for that. But Urseg is a guy who's probably a top 7 or 8 guy in his 20s. And if things work out like the UFC plans and like the odds makers expect, you're about to hand this guy his 3rd straight loss. Keith made a great point. Moreno is probably a step up from Kai Kara France. Yeah, I mean, the knockout, that's a Kai Kara France thing. KKF might be the hardest puncher in the men's flyweight division. It's probably either him or Manel Kopp. But, Moreno's a better overall fighter. And, yeah. Short version of my notes. Urseg is a better striker than I thought he was arriving in the UFC. He's more athletic than you would think he is. I mean, he looks like a skinny Ryan Hall, but no, he is a quick, fluid athlete, fast hands, good boxer. Like Keith mentioned, Moreno is as good a boxer and throws a greater diversity of strikes. He's a good offensive wrestler. He's an outstanding grappler. And perhaps most importantly, he puts himself in his best position to win. I think this will be competitive. It could end up looking a bit like, like either of their fights with Alexandre Pantoja, where the individual rounds are all pretty competitive. And while Moreno wins the decision, you can point to a round or two or even a moment or two within those rounds that it really kind of hinged on. But yeah, give me Moreno to win 3 rounds out of 5, maybe 4 rounds out of 5 by kicking at Urseg's legs. If and when Urseg starts reacting to that, kick to the body, go upstairs. I would expect Moreno to kind of march forward and try to put Urseg on the back foot. But if Urseg stands his ground or starts coming back at Moreno, I could see Moreno hitting some well-timed takedowns. Give me Moreno to win a decision here in a fantastic fight where he is just a half step ahead, just a little more dialed in. And at those few pivotal moments, he's the guy that comes out ahead. And that is it. The Sure Dog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 64, Moreno versus Urseg, also known as UFC Mexico City. I've been Ben. He has been Keith. Hopefully this isn't your first time watching one of our previews because, yeah, this has been a weird one as I'm kind of splicing together 2 separate videos of Keith and me talking about these. I greatly prefer to talk live with Keith. I feel like I've been sitting here at my desk just quacking into the void like a maniac for 2 hours. He probably feels the same way. But at any rate, we hope you enjoyed it. We normally do our best to bring you as good a mix of in-depth analysis and occasional asides as you'll find anywhere in this industry. Please do give us a like, subscribe. Neither of those things cost you a thing. They make our bosses happy. They allow us to continue bringing you this content free of charge. Drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on these fights. I didn't pick a single upset. I'm ashamed of myself for that reason. If you know which ones I missed out on, let me know, because if you're right, I'll give you your flowers on the recap. You just got to come and collect them. We are live on the SureDog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll talk about all 13 of these fights in reverse order, from the headliner all the way down to the first prelim. We'll talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We'll talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and we'll talk with you. The live chat is open that whole time, so we're taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy the fights.